The rain had come suddenly, as it often did in the evenings, sweeping across the street in sheets of gray. I had been walking home from the corner store, a small umbrella above my head, when I saw her standing at the front door of the house. My stepmother. She stood there like a statue, her form barely visible through the downpour, her thin coat clinging to her figure, as though she were trying to remain perfectly still. I paused for a moment, uncertain of what to do. I hadn't seen her like this before, so vulnerable. For a long time, she had been the one who controlled everything in the house, silently asserting her presence, pushing everyone into corners. But here, now, she was different. She was waiting. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I couldn't help but wonder, who was she waiting for? My father? I knew he would be home soon, he always was. But something about her presence here, in the rain, told me it wasn't just about him coming back. It was about something else, something unspoken. Something hidden beneath the surface of this house we all lived in. I stood there, a few yards away, watching her. The rain fell harder, soaking her to the skin. Her hair, usually neatly styled, clung to her face in wet strands, but she didn't move. She didn't seem to care about the cold, the rain, the mess she was making. She was waiting for him. I could feel it in the way her shoulders slumped, in the way her hands hung loosely by her sides. I had always hated her for what she did, for the way she had come into my life and turned everything upside down, for the way she had stolen my father's attention, and with it, my place in our family. But now, as I stood there watching her in the rain, I began to see something different. Her eyes were empty, distant. I couldn't see her thoughts, but I could feel them. She wasn't just waiting for him to come home. She was waiting for something more. She was waiting for him to see her, truly see her, after everything that had passed between them. After all the hurt that had accumulated over the years. She wanted more than just his return. She wanted his forgiveness, or maybe just his acknowledgement that she hadn't been wrong. That she wasn't just the stranger in this house. That she wasn't just my replacement. The bitterness I had felt for her in the past was still there. But it felt like it had been muted, pushed aside by something else. I wanted to understand what was going on, what was happening in her mind. But part of me knew I would never be able to. Her silence, her presence, her control, they were all things that could never be fully understood, only observed. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the front door creaked open, and my father stepped out onto the porch. His face softened when he saw her standing there, drenched from the rain. But he didn't move toward her immediately. Instead, he hesitated. For a moment, I saw something like doubt cross his face. Then he stepped forward, pulling her into his arms. He didn't say anything. They just stood there, together, in the rain, holding each other. She wasn't crying. There were no desperate pleas or harsh words. Just silence. Just the quiet, heavy weight of all the things left unspoken. I don't know why I kept watching them. Maybe it was because I finally understood something in that moment. Maybe it was because I realized that she was not the enemy. Not the villain I had built her up to be. She was just a woman, standing in the rain, waiting for someone to recognize her. To see her as more than the other woman in my father's life. But in the end, the truth was, I wasn't sure if he would ever truly see her the way she wanted him to. Maybe it didn't even matter. The moment passed, and the silence between them remained, unbroken. They weren't the family I had imagined, the way I had once hoped things could be. But somehow, in that fleeting moment, they were just two people, lost, hurting. and waiting for something they weren't sure could ever be fixed. I turned and walked away, leaving them to their quiet moment in the rain. I didn't need to watch anymore. I had seen enough. Her silence, her waiting, her expectations, it wasn't my battle to fight. It never was. As I walked away, the rain began to ease up, the clouds parting just enough for a sliver of sunlight to break through. I wasn't sure if anything had changed. But I knew one thing for certain: the woman standing in the rain, waiting for him to return, had been waiting for a long time. And in the end, that might be the most heartbreaking thing of all. The rain came down in sheets, an unforgiving deluge that seemed to match the mood of the house. I had walked past the window when I noticed her, my stepmother, standing at the front door, staring out into the darkening evening. There was no umbrella, no attempt to shield herself from the storm. She stood there as if frozen, as if the rain were part of some ritual she couldn't break. I stopped in my tracks, my heart beating a little faster as I watched her. Her posture was rigid, her hands clasped in front of her, her face blank but tense. It wasn't the usual cold indifference I had come to expect from her. This was something different. This was raw. I had always seen her as a figure that controlled the house with quiet authority. A woman who demanded space without ever truly claiming it with words. But now, as she stood there in the rain, it was clear that she was no longer in control. It was almost as if she was waiting for something, someone, to return. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, watching her, but it felt like an eternity. The silence between us, though separated by walls and distance, seemed thick enough to swallow me whole. I should have turned away. I should have gone upstairs, pretended like I hadn't seen her at all. But I didn't. Something about the stillness in her figure pulled me in. And then, just as I was about to move toward the door, I saw him. My father. He was standing at the foot of the driveway, looking up at the house. I couldn't see his face, but I could tell from the way his shoulders were slumped that he hadn't been expecting this, her standing there in the rain, waiting for him. For a long time, neither of them moved. He didn't rush to her side, and she didn't go to him. It was as if they were both suspended in time, each one rooted to the spot. Each one locked in their own unspoken world. I watched as my father slowly started to move toward the door. But there was hesitation in his steps, like he wasn't sure how to bridge the gap between them. He had been avoiding her for weeks, I knew that much. His absence had become more than just physical, he had been emotionally distant. Perhaps because of her presence. Or perhaps because of something even deeper that neither of them could face. She remained in the same spot, unmoving, as though waiting for him to come to her. Waiting for him to fill the silence with the words that would make everything right again. When he finally reached the door, he didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at her. For a brief moment, I thought he might turn away, that he might leave again, but instead, he stepped forward and reached out for her hand. She didn't pull away. In that moment, I saw something shift in her. It wasn't the cold, calculated indifference I had seen for months. It wasn't the domineering presence that had made my life feel like an afterthought. No, now she seemed small, vulnerable, even. As though all the power she had held over this house, over me, over my father, had been stripped away by the simple act of waiting. Her eyes met his, and there, in the midst of the storm, I saw something neither of them had been willing to acknowledge before. Her silence, her waiting, had never been about control. It had been about desperation. She had been waiting for my father to see her, to truly see her. To understand that she was still there, still trying to be part of this broken family. My father, for the first time in what felt like ages, reached for her with no hesitation. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as though she were something fragile. And I could see it in his eyes, the regret, the longing. The acknowledgement of what they had both lost. I stood there, my body frozen in place, feeling like an intruder in their moment. The rain continued to fall, but somehow, it felt quieter now. As though the world outside had paused to give them this space. I didn't know if this would change anything between them. I didn't know if it would fix what had been broken for so long. But it was enough for me to realize that they, too, were lost in their own ways. That even she, who had once felt so distant, was waiting for something I couldn't quite understand, something that went beyond her silence. And as I turned away, retreating back into the shadows of the house, I felt the weight of their moment linger in the air. I didn't know where it would lead, or how things would change after this. But I knew one thing for sure, her silence, the quiet that had ruled over this house, had finally been broken. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough for them to start again. But for now, the rain still fell. And I was left with the sound of their unspoken words echoing in my mind. She stood at the front door, rain cascading down around her, and I couldn't look away. My stepmother. Her coat clung to her frame, drenched through. Her dark hair plastered to her face, but she didn't seem to care. She stood still, looking out into the storm, as if waiting for something, or someone, to return. I should have kept walking, gone back to my room, but something about the scene held me there. A quiet tension between us that seemed to fill the space in ways I couldn't explain. The house had changed ever since she moved in, and so had my father. The distance between us had grown. At first, I blamed her. Her presence was invasive, her dominance subtle but unyielding. She was the kind of person who didn't have to say anything to make you feel small. Her silence, her calmness, it made the air feel thick, suffocating. But now, as I watched her in the rain, something else came over me. I had spent so long resenting her, refusing to see her as anything more than the woman who had taken my place in my father's heart. But tonight, I saw her differently. I saw a woman standing in the rain, vulnerable and waiting for something she couldn't control. I stepped closer, my feet dragging me forward without thought. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Ever since our last argument when I had accused her of taking over everything. But tonight, the silence between us felt different. It felt heavier. "Why are you out here?" I asked, my voice sounding louder than I expected. She didn't turn to face me right away. She just stood there, her hands hanging limply by her sides, her gaze lost in the distance. "Waiting," she said finally, her voice barely audible over the storm. "For him?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Her lips quivered, the ghost of a smile that wasn't really a smile at all. She nodded, just once. "Yes." I didn't know what to say. What could I say to that? I had never seen her like this. She had always been so composed, so in control, her silence always a wall I couldn't breach. But now, she was nothing like the woman I had resented for so long. She was a person, someone fragile, someone who had feelings, just like anyone else. "I didn't think you would still be here, waiting for him," I said quietly. "After everything." Her eyes flickered toward me then, and for the first time, I saw something human in her gaze. It wasn't the cold stare I had grown used to, but something more like sadness, something raw. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. The words felt like a confession, like something that had been buried under layers of pride, of silence, of control. She paused, looking down at her hands, as though the weight of her own vulnerability was too much for her to bear. I've tried everything, but I'm still waiting for him to come back. I didn't know how to respond. My heart, which had been hardened by years of bitterness, softened just a little. I could see it now, how she had quietly carved a space for herself in this house, in my father's life, trying desperately to fit into a place that was never meant for her. And in that silence, in that waiting, she had become as trapped as I had. We were both prisoners of the same house, of the same love that we both clung to in different ways. You know, I said, my voice quieter now, you don't have to wait for him to come back. You don't have to keep pretending that everything is okay. She shook her head slowly, the rain still falling in a steady rhythm, the sound filling the space between us. I don't know how to let go. I could see the truth in her eyes. The fear that she would lose everything if she stopped waiting, stopped hoping. But I had learned the hard way that waiting, hoping for someone to change, wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to make my father come back. And it wasn't going to heal the wounds between us. You can't hold on to someone who isn't holding on to you, I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I've been trying to do that for too long. And look where it's gotten me. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. For the first time, I saw her not as an intruder, but as someone who was just as lost as I was. She wasn't the enemy. She was just someone caught in the same web of silence and unspoken words. The sound of a car engine broke through the silence, distant but growing louder. I turned toward the street, knowing it was him, my father, coming back. She didn't move, didn't even acknowledge the sound. She stayed standing there, waiting, as though the rain had washed away everything else, leaving her just as she had been before. Her gaze was still fixed on the horizon, on a world that didn't seem to care. A world that had long passed her by. And as he pulled into the driveway, I walked away, leaving her to the rain and to whatever it was she was waiting for. Her silence, her waiting, it wasn't mine to fix anymore. It wasn't anyone's. Some battles were just too far gone, too deep to heal with words. But I had finally learned something in that moment. You can't make someone else's decisions for them. And you can't save them from the silence they choose to live in. As I walked back inside, the weight of the rain felt like a release. The coolness of the evening air soothing me as I left her standing there, waiting for him to return. She stood at the door, the rain beating down against her like it had been sent to wash away everything. Her coat, soaked through, clung to her as she stared out into the storm. Her eyes focused on something only she could see. I wasn't sure how long she'd been standing there. Minutes? Hours? It felt like an eternity. I had been watching her from the window, trying not to make a sound, trying to understand what she was doing out there. I hadn't spoken to her in days, ever since the last argument we'd had, when the words between us had cut sharper than I cared to admit. I had never been able to connect with her. And maybe that was part of the reason I had been avoiding her lately. But now, as I watched her stand in the rain, waiting for something in me couldn't help but wonder what she was really waiting for. The house, once full of laughter and warmth, had become quieter over the years. Her presence more of an absence than anything else. My father, too, had become distant, quieter in a way that seemed to echo her silence. It was as though we were all being slowly replaced by something unspoken, something heavier than we could put into words. But now, as I looked at her standing there, I realized something that I had never let myself believe before. She was just as trapped as I was. I had always hated her, blamed her for tearing apart the family I had known, for stepping into a space that used to be filled with only my father and me. But tonight, her stillness in the rain was different. It wasn't about me or her, or even about my father anymore. It was about something deeper. It was about waiting. I moved toward the door, unsure if I should interrupt, unsure of what I would even say. But I couldn't stand the thought of leaving her there alone in the rain, as if she were a part of the storm itself. I opened the door, stepping out onto the porch. "You don't have to wait out here," I said softly, my voice barely louder than the sound of the rain. She didn't move, didn't even acknowledge that I had spoken. Her eyes were still locked on the horizon, her face expressionless, except for the faint tightness around her mouth. I stepped closer, my shoes squelching in the puddles that had started to form around us. "Dad's not coming home yet." I hesitated, unsure if my words would change anything. "He's been staying late more and more these days." She didn't flinch. She didn't say anything. Her eyes flickered for a second, but her silence remained unbroken. I waited, the tension between us palpable. I wanted her to say something, anything, that would make this feel real. But there was nothing. "I can't keep pretending, either," I added, my own frustration bubbling to the surface, the words pouring out without me thinking. "I don't know what you're hoping for. You've been standing here for hours, waiting for something that isn't going to happen. He's not the man you think he is. He never was. I think you've been hoping for the wrong things." Her face didn't change. She just stood there, rain soaking her completely, her silence wrapping itself around us like a wall I couldn't break. It wasn't until I moved a step back inside that she finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "I'm not waiting for him," she said, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since I'd walked outside. "I'm waiting for me." The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I didn't understand. But as I stood there, watching her, something clicked in my mind. It wasn't my father she was waiting for. It wasn't me. It was herself. It was the woman she had buried under layers of silence and control. The person she used to be before everything changed. "I've lost myself in this house," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even recognize who I've become. Waiting for someone else to fix things, waiting for him to see me again. I've been waiting for things that aren't even mine to claim." I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest. Her silence wasn't just about me, about us. It was about her own struggle, her own battle with herself. She had never asked for the life that she had ended up with. And yet here she was, waiting for something she could never have. I couldn't say anything in that moment. The rain, the silence, the quiet admission that had hung between us, it all felt like too much. She wasn't just waiting for my father to come back. She was waiting for herself, for a version of herself that had been lost along the way. I turned and walked back inside, leaving her standing in the rain. But before I closed the door, I looked back. For the first time, I saw her as more than just the woman who had come into our lives and made everything feel different. She was just a person, like me, lost in a world that didn't always make sense, waiting for something to shift, something to change. Maybe we were both waiting for the same thing, to finally let go. As I closed the door behind me, I didn't feel the bitterness I once had for her. The storm raged on outside, but I no longer felt like I was caught in the middle. I spent the rest of the evening pacing around my room, my thoughts swirling around the conversation I had shared with her in the rain. The weight of what she had said lingered, and I couldn't shake it off. She had spoken about waiting for herself, about being lost in this life, in this house. She hadn't been waiting for my father to return, she had been waiting for a version of herself she'd abandoned, and maybe, somewhere deep down, she was hoping to find that woman again. I didn't know if I felt sorry for her or if I resented her even more for the way she had made me feel invisible for so long. As the rain continued to fall outside, I sat on my bed, my mind replaying the silence between us. For years, I had been angry with her, angry at the way she had come into my life, changed everything, taken my place, my father's attention. But tonight, something had shifted. Something had clicked in my head. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. But I wasn't sure how I was supposed to feel. For so long, I had been waiting for her to make the first move, to apologize, to admit that she had ruined everything. I had spent so much time waiting for the wrong things. I had been waiting for her to change, for my father to change. But I wasn't the one who needed to change. I was the one who needed to stop waiting for something that wasn't mine to control. I found myself standing up and walking toward the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. I wasn't sure why I still cared, but I couldn't deny that I did. She was part of my life now, whether I liked it or not, and it wasn't just her I was angry at. It was the way I had allowed myself to become tangled in the mess of what this house had become. The confusion, the silence, the broken pieces. It wasn't until that moment, standing by the window, that I realized I wasn't just waiting for things to get better. I had been waiting for someone else to make it all okay. Waiting for someone to fix the things that I had been ignoring in myself. I had to stop waiting. I had to stop looking for someone else to change, to make things right. I had to take control. The next morning, I woke up early. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a gray sky and wet streets. The air smelled fresh, and for the first time in days, it felt like I could breathe. I found her in the kitchen, making coffee, just like she always did in the mornings. There was a moment of hesitation between us, the same silence that had always existed. But today, I wasn't going to let it take over. I walked into the kitchen, stood there for a moment, and then I spoke. "You're not going to find what you're looking for out there," I said softly. My voice steady but not unkind. "I know you think waiting for him to come back, waiting for him to see you, maybe you think that'll fix everything. But it won't. And you know it." She looked at me, her expression unreadable, and for a long moment, there was nothing. No words. No reaction. Just the silence. But then she set the coffee pot down, wiped her hands on her apron, and for the first time, I saw something in her face. Not guilt, not anger, just understanding. It was as though she had finally heard me, really heard me, and in that quiet moment, we both understood what needed to be said. "I don't know how to let go of the past," she finally said, her voice soft, almost fragile. "You don't have to," I replied, my voice gentler now. "But you do have to stop waiting for it to come back. Stop waiting for him to change, or for me to change, or for anything to go back to the way it was. The past is gone. We have to figure out how to move forward." There was silence again, but it was different this time. It wasn't oppressive or suffocating. It was an understanding, a shared moment of clarity. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting with her anymore. I didn't feel like we were enemies. We were just two people, living in the same space. trying to figure out how to coexist without the weight of the past dragging us down. We were both waiting for something, but maybe it was time to stop waiting at all. She nodded, slowly, and for the first time, I didn't feel resentment. I didn't feel the distance between us. Instead, I felt peace. I'm tired of waiting, she whispered. So am I said quietly, offering her a small smile. I didn't know if we would ever truly understand each other. I didn't know if she would ever be able to find the version of herself she was looking for. But in that moment, standing in the kitchen, I knew one thing for sure. I was done waiting for things to change. I was done waiting for anyone else to fix what was broken. It was time to start fresh. And I wasn't going to wait for anyone to tell me how to do it,